Hello, you beautiful souls, and welcome to another week of Awaken and Align. I am recording this on Monday, June 26th, 2023, and I cannot believe that July is just around the corner. I made an announcement last week that I am doing my first ever How to Manifest workshop starting on June 23rd during the Venus retrograde in the sign of Leo. And there are so many significant reasons why I'm doing this. So I hope that you listen on to the episodes that are coming up this month because we are going to go through the astrology. We are going to go through the significations of Venus in the sign of Leo and it going retrograde because Venus ultimately is the planet about our value, our worth, relationships, union, money. It literally is one of the most significant planets because of its proximity to Earth. And when planets go retrograde, they are closer to Earth. And Leo is the sign all about being able to be seen, allowing ourselves to be seen, shining. It is the sign of courage and bravery and confidence. So, really, during this Venus retrograde, we are going to be investigating the things that hold us back from truly shining in our authenticity and allowing ourselves to shine in our soul's purpose because Leo rules the sun, and the sun is all about our soul and our purpose and why we're here. I bring this all up because I decided to do this 40-day journey during the Venus retrograde because the Venus retrograde is also 40 days. So many synchronicities. But yeah, it's my first time leading this workshop, and I've done similar 40-day free things on YouTube and on TikTok. So if you are financially strapped and you can't commit to the financial commitment and the exchange, you can just do the book on your own and maybe go watch the videos, the 40 videos that I have on YouTube and TikTok. But if this is in alignment with where you are financially at this time, I tried to keep the price pretty low. $606, which is about $100 each session. It's 2 hours every Sunday for 6 weeks. I tried to keep it as low as possible while also, being in alignment with my worth. But I really want to help guide people on this journey, people who are ready, because the only thing that's stopping most of us from manifesting the things that we desire is resistance, and resistance being in the form of fear, doubt, and again, not allowing ourselves to truly shine. And what prevents us from truly shining, and honestly, with all the studying that I've been doing, it's really simple. The root cause of all these things is the patriarchy, the misogynistic narrative that we've been programmed to believe, colonization, late stage capitalism, palm color domination. And I say that because I don't want to continue the narrative of white supremacy. So I use these cute terms that we use on TikTok so that I don't get shadow banned. But really, once we start investigating these things and how these isms, these toxic paradigms that prevent us from being who we truly are and being in alignment with nature, nature is neurodivergent. That was a direct quote from Cassandra Lamb on one of the previous episodes. We can show up as who we authentically are. And for me, manifesting is just co-creation. It's just allowing ourselves to be who we are. And by default, we attract everything that is in alignment to us. And that's why actually writing this book, it was a journey of creating a lot of content around reclaiming that word manifesting and I guess, redefining what that means for me, because it's not just about acquiring things and it's not just manifesting for the sake of getting things. It really is about being in alignment with your soul and what your soul came here to do while having a human experience. So, if you are ready for this journey, it starts on Sunday, July 23rd, and we meet for 7 sessions, 6 of them being on Sundays, and the last one is August 31st. And we really go to the core of what is holding you back. We really investigate the root causes of these resistance things that block us from attraction, because we live in an energetic universe where everything is energy and everything is attracted to us. And this is no fault to the individual. We were just not taught these things. We were not taught how to be in our power, especially the divine feminine. We were taught to focus on other people. We were taught to not be in our own energy, in our own intuition, in our own power. So I also really think that's significant because this is a Venus retrograde in the sign of Leo, where we are shining in our authentic self. So if you are interested, please sign up. You can always contact me for questions. It is based on the content of my book, How to Manifest, but I'm super excited to lead my first workshop, and obviously it's the first one, so there's going to be a lot of tweaking, a lot of, shifting, but this is something that I'm very passionate about because I really do believe that we are meant to co-create here on this planet. This is a manifestation planet, planet Earth, Mother Earth, and we are meant to live our best lives. So, I am so excited so all the links will be in the show notes. I'm just getting super excited to introduce you to my next guest, which is like super synchronistic that we met when we did. We met during the solar eclipse in Aries on April 21st, I believe. And Mecca is a Sagittarius sun, Aquarius moon, and Leo rising. And I'm calling out her big three because we have so much synastry. We're both double fire signs with an Aquarius moon. And we just had this really fun talk about astrology and how Mecca came into astrology and decided that this was what she was going to do. And it's very similar to my story. It's almost like astrology finds you. You don't necessarily find it because it offers some kind of key to a missing piece of the puzzle of self-actualization and understanding the self. But I'm just going to read what she has on her page, on her website, which is, let me show you, mylifecreated.com. After applying the principles of astrology to improve my own life, these are in the words from Mecca, I opened my astro coaching practice back in 2012, fueled by a background in social services, so Aquarius moon of her, my experience as a single mom, and a passion to create positive change. A professionally trained astrologer through the Rebecca Gordon Astrology Mentorship Program, I work to help others to claim and create a life they truly want by teaching them how to better tap into their natural born gifts. I've taught workshops across the US and abroad on astrology and personal development. Some of my featured appearances also include Bustle, Essence, Tarot.com, Cocoa Butter, and Cosmopolitan. I've also been the host for TLC's Stargazing and currently co-host an astrology podcast, Stars on Fire. I have also served as a board member for the International Association of Ethics in Astrology, and she is the author of several books: Astrology for Happiness and Success, Your Cosmic Coloring Book, and the Astrology Journal, A Celestial Guide to Recording Your Cosmic Journey are out now. I hope you enjoy this very Sagittarius conversation. And what I mean by that is I didn't have anything planned. And I knew she would be okay with it because she is a Sagittarius sun. But there was no like destination. We just decided to go with it and see where our conversation went. So we talked about her origin story, how she found astrology, how relationships really were the catalyst for her understanding herself. We talk about fate. Does she believe in fate? Does she believe in twin flames? and also just like life in general. So, without further ado, oh my goodness, here is my conversation with the one and only Mecca. Hi, Mecca. Welcome to Awaken and Align.
Hey, Laura. Thank you for having me.
I feel like this is such a full circle moment for me because I met you at the solar eclipse in Aries and
Hmm.
almost at the Scorpio eclipse. So it's like an eclipse cycle that
Yeah.
we're doing this talk. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, when I met you, I was introduced to you by our mutual friend Colin.
Hmm.
He was like, you have some synastry, and we were kind of like figuring out our synastry. So I have some basic B questions for you, just for fun to start. What is your big three?
My big three, I'm a Leo rising, Sagittarius sun, and an Aquarius moon.
Exactly. So we have the Sag and the Aquarius synastry there. Um,
Hmm.
what is your favorite sign?
My favorite sign. Oh, goodness. I think I don't know. I think, well, Leo probably.
Mhm.
Um, but that's also because I have a lot of Leo in my chart. I don't know. I guess it's the fire, like fire signs in general, like Leo, Sag, Aries, like my daughter's in Aries, for example. I don't know. I like fire, because we're playful and we're goofy and brave and not afraid to make asses of ourselves when
Exactly.
it comes to stuff, the adventure, that adventurous spirit. So yeah, fire, I guess fire is my favorite.
We're just fun. Come on.
Yeah.
On now. Even like when we were going out that night when we all first met, there was so much fire placements and
Hmm.
you meet new people and you all decide to go out to dinner and like hang out. Like that's very fiery, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then keep the party going after that.
Exactly. Which we did. Thank you,
Right.
Colin.
Right.
And we bonded over the fact that your daughter is an Aries, but your daughter's a later Aries, so she has like some Taurus stuff, which I thought was so interesting.
Yeah, she's an Aries, but she's a Virgo moon, Virgo rising, and then her Mars is in Taurus. She has a Mars, Saturn, Jupiter all in Taurus. So
Oh,
she's
wow.
yeah, so she's very grounded.
Okay,
Um
that's
yeah,
I
yeah,
love
for
that.
sure.
I love that your daughter has that groundedness of the earth signs because I have no earth. I have Chiron and
Mm,
Taurus, so
interesting. And
I
yeah,
need some earth in my life.
I have a small bit of Earth. I have a Saturn in Virgo and a Mercury in Capricorn. So I have a little bit. I don't have water. Water is what I'm missing.
Oh, okay. I got you covered on the water. I have water in my watery houses.
Nice.
Um, so what is your least favorite sign?
My least favorite sign. Oh goodness gracious. Um, is there? Well, I think in the past I've had a lot of like weird interactions or frictions with Libra, but that's because my North Node is Libra. And I find that like when people impact your North Node, they kind of teaching you something about yourself that you need to incorporate, into your own sort of like makeup or fabric. And I think for the longest time with Libras, I would get frustrated with them because they had the ability to kind of see both sides or multiple angles, right? Like of a situation. And I feel like, with the Sag cap, it would be like things would have to be very black or white. Like, like there's no middle ground, you know what I mean? Like I would struggle with that a lot. And I think over time, as I've gotten older, I think I've developed more of an appreciation for that Libra energy of being able to like not always rush to judgment, on things, leaving room for like, changing your mind on stuff. And then I think the other piece of it is like being more cooperative, because I think as a fire sign, it's so easy for me to be like, I'll just take care of it myself. I'll do it myself, like that kind of hyper independent sort of energy. But then sometimes, you can kind of come off as a dick when you do that. Um, so yeah,
I'm
I guess that's my answer to that.
Yeah, I'm just laughing because I relate to the Libra thing. I have an exalted sun, obviously in Aries, but I have all my
Hmm.
planets in Libra, and I have
Mm.
Mars in Libra, Saturn in Libra, and Pluto in Libra because, the universe was like, we need to keep this girl humble. She needs the checks and balances.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah. I feel somewhat similar, because I feel like even though I have a Mars in Leo, my Mars is retrograde. So I
Mm.
could just imagine if it was direct, like I'd be 10 times worse than what I am.
Or or fun.
Or fun, yes. Depending on how you look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for playing that game. Whenever I ask people this question, they usually say their least favorite sign is their own sign. You know?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, it's funny because like I guess being an astrologer, you can kind of see like the pluses and the minuses like of each sign. Like for me being a Sagittarius, I think sometimes in watching other Sages, especially like for example, like celebrity Sages,
Yes.
um, who get themselves in hot water because they always have like these really strong opinions about stuff. And
Mhm.
you're just, and me, I'll just be like, oh, just shut up. Like just shut up.
Well, especially
But
yeah, the
yeah,
later Sages have Mercury in Sag, which is fallen, right?
right, right. So Mercury is what in its detriment in Sagittarius, right? So yeah, I mean sometimes that like when they always talk about like Sagittarius putting our foot in our mouth.
Mhm.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know. I mean, I definitely have had my share of those moments because I have a Mercury Jupiter opposition in my chart. So I've had those opposite those challenges, but I do feel like the fact that I have a Mercury in Capricorn and my Mercury is retrograde, I feel like it saves me sometimes for saying like more like ridiculous shit.
Okay. Got it. So all the retrograde planets save you.
Yes, they're like, let's think about that.
Pull it back.
Let's right. Let's
Pull the
just
brakes.
right.
Um, I actually would love to hear more about your story, and we can take this as far back as you feel comfortable. The reason why I loved meeting you is it's so fun to meet other New Yorkers who are also astrologers, who are also activists. It's like these like Venn diagram like intersections where you're like, my people, but not only that, but you're a double fire sign and an Aquarius moon like myself. I was like,
Hmm.
yes, we need to talk.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
love that you have experience in social services. Is very Aquarius moon of you. So please take it away.
Yeah, my career path is I guess a bit interesting. I mean, as a Sagittarius, I feel like my life has been like this long sort of winding journey of like being called to something and then ending up in one spot and ending up in another. Like um when I first started out like on my career path, I had the idea that I was going to like so back in college, I thought I was like, oh, I was going to go into psychology, um, and study that for a little while. But I always had a love for writing. Like ever since I was a little kid, I always wanted to write, and I used to write like little stories, and I would like get reams of paper and staple them together and make like little books and stuff like that out of it, of like my own little homemade stories. And as I got older and I started gravitating more towards like science, psychology, biology, like those were kind of things that I was kind of dabbling in. But I also suck at math, which is funny because astrology is also math.
Yeah.
So I was like I couldn't escape it somehow. Anyway, but yeah, I but I would say like when I think about the common theme, like through each of the pieces or like each of the facets of like the different careers that I've had, because like after college, I worked in publishing for a little while, because I wanted to produce and publish books that had something to say,
Mhm.
in terms of literary nonfiction or literary fiction. Like I wanted to talk about societal issues and I wanted that kind of thing, but those kind of books weren't really that popular. It was more about like the entertainment factor of it, and I quickly became disillusioned with publishing and left, and that's how I ended up in social services. So like for me, like my mission in life has always wanted to help people. I wanted to help people. I wanted to make the world better. I wanted to do it on my terms as well. Cause like, as an Aquarius moon, we need our freedom.
Oh, yeah.
Um, we need to do things in our own unique way. And I did social services. I'm working in like workforce development. So there was like a coaching aspect of that in terms of like helping people to find employment. um I also did like grant writing and stuff like that. So I did that for a while, but I also kind of became burnt out with that, because if you've ever worked in social services, there can be a lot of like red tape and bureaucracy, and it sometimes can just be like feel like it's a never ending sort of cycle when it comes to the work that you do, and not always having the right resources or people behind you to help you do it. So sometimes it can kind of feel like you're kind of out there kind of on your own, essentially, trying to fight the good fight. It makes me think about like that scene from Game of Thrones, um with Jon Snow, and it's just him against a whole horde, like a whole army. Like that's how it started to feel that way. And that was kind of like the catalyst for me to figure out like, okay, well, if this isn't something that's making me happy, like what do I want to do? In that sort of searching is when I found astrology. And it actually happened not so much by career choice or like searching for a career, but more about like thinking about relationships and trying to figure out like my dating life and what was going on with that. And so there was a book, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. The author, her name is Kiki T. It's a book called The Celestial Sexpot's Handbook, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's the title of it. And I had enjoyed the book, that I ended up getting a couple of readings with her, and that was like kind of like the starting point for me in terms of like diving deeper into astrology. And it was just kind of like, so this was like over 10 years ago at this point, right? Like when I first started out, and there wasn't nearly as much stuff out there as there is now. Like we didn't really have any apps. Um, there were like websites where, that had like message boards and you can talk to people that way and things like that. But there wasn't as much information, as there is now. So for me, it was like trying to scour the internet, talking to people online as much as I could. Um, it just so happened that I ended up meeting an astrologer who ended up becoming my mentor here in New York City. Rebecca Gordon is her name. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but yeah, it was just kind of like literally like the moment I showed interest in astrology, literally that's when things started to like align for me, and me like meeting people and like finding like the right resources at the right time that helped me to get to this point. So it was a lot, like for me, it started out very much as like a hobby, like a like kind of like self-interest in terms of like, how do I use that for me? And the more that I started to practice with it, the more that I played around with it and was started to do it for like friends and family. I feel like that's like the typical introduction for astrology from for most astrologers, is that like you find it, you get excited about it, you try to learn as much as you can, and then you start dabbling in reading for people that and then eventually it becomes a thing where you're like, oh, I think I want to do this for real, so that was kind of like how I like my path there.
What made you interested in relationships? Because were you going through something at the time in your life?
Yes.
Of course.
So yeah, so I think I mentioned earlier that I have zero water in my chart. So I tend to pull in people, especially romantic partners that have water, that are water signs, water moons, somewhere in their chart, there's like, a significant amount of water. And I swear to you, like, this this was so funny because there was a point in time where I was getting nothing but like Scorpio men or like men with like Scorpio moons. Like it was just all like just like I was like Scorpio magnet. It's funny because like for a while I had a running joke that I was like the Scorpio whisperer. I swear. It's so funny. And like they always talk about like whatever you lack in your chart, you end up
Yeah.
pulling it in, and you pull it in until you kind of master the lesson of whatever that sign is trying to teach you. So yeah, so for me it was a Scorpio man that kind of kicked off my interest in like astrology, because I was like, what is happening? Why do I keep running into this issue? Like, and like Scorpios have a reputation for being very like enigmatic and mysterious, and
Yeah.
not always, not they're not always like the most open books, right? So for me, being the Sagittarius that I am, I was like, I have to find out, like I have to know like why, things are the way they are, why he is the way he is, like how do I. And also too, I think on some level with my Mars and Leo, it was very much like I need to win. I
I
need
need
to
to
be,
win at
and
love.
I need to beat him, like very, very, not my most shining moment, I'll say. But yeah, I guess there'll be some people who can relate to that. But yeah, that was where I was. So when in reading the book, it was to kind of gain some more insight about like that particular relationship. And then when I got the readings and Kiki did the readings for me, I was able to get insight into myself as to like my own sort of like patterns as to like why I kept, going for those types of relationships. So, that kind of like was the catalyst for me, like in terms of getting deeper into my self understanding, and then from there being able to understand others, more. So yeah.
And it's so interesting because I feel like most people's entryway into astrology or spirituality is through like a tower moment, like a break, right? And usually
Mm-hmm.
up. And it's
Right.
noticing your pattern in breakups that you're like, light bulb moment, maybe it's me.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. Because after a while it's kind of like, okay, like I had to tell myself, like, all right, sis, like, like you can't keep blaming everybody else, for your troubles. Like we have to take some personal responsibility here. So yeah, for me, astrology was a tool for me to do that. And I really appreciated it too, in the sense that like the way in which I learned it. So the astrology, so I know there's many different branches of astrology. And for me, the way that I entered into the field was through evolutionary astrology. Talking about like the nodes and Pluto. I mean, I have a moon Pluto aspect in my own chart. Just kind of learning more about like or even just thinking about like the fifth house, and how the fifth house, sometimes is connected to unfinished business where it pertains to like romantic partners and things of that nature. So it was that I found really, really interesting. Stephen Forrest, who's a renowned astrologer, he had a book called Yesterday's Sky that was really interesting, and reading about the nodes and how that is linked to like choices and habits that we have now. So it was just, yeah, that was just kind of like the opening, the into me like diving in deeper into this. And I really appreciated the way in which astrology wasn't about like laying blame, or making people feel like they were victims in any way, like some, I mean, like when I think about sometimes like some of the more traditional faiths, like religious faith, sometimes there can be this thing of like it's your fault, like you're born bad and you have to try to be good, like that's kind of like the theme that comes up a lot. And in studying astrology for me it was kind of like, okay, this is the chart that I have, or this is the it's kind of like makes me think of like, like any of those like RPG games like Lara Croft, for example. This is such a sad like
Yes.
metaphor. But just thinking about like Tomb Raider, Lara Croft, like, or like any of those kind of like video games where you have like you have a journey before you, and then you have to figure out like, okay, what are the tools, what am I putting in my
Mhm.
knapsack, right, to take with me on this journey. And that's how I kind of like look at the chart of like, this is your map, and then these are the tools that you're bringing with you on your journey. Now go out there and do it, like that's kind of like how I see it. So for me that was empowering.
I also have a fifth house sun. Because now that you're saying the fifth house, I never heard it described that way.
Yeah.
Romantic relationships.
Yeah, I actually learned about that through through Stephen Forrest and through another astrologer, Jessica Shepard. Jessica, she has a book called that's about the fifth house, called I think Karmic Dates and Momentary Mates. I think that's the title of it. And she talks about like fifth house um placements, fifth house planets, and how that shows up in partners that we gravitate to, and what that means in terms of like kind of working through our stuff.
Mhm.
So it's a really great book. I would definitely recommend it to anybody who's interested. But yeah, that idea of like our fifth house kind of showing us like some of those kind of like our love hooks, or like our love patterns, and kind of like the partners that we gravitate to, like in terms of like that chemistry, or like that spark, how that can also kind of uh kind of lead to something deeper in terms of like how, yeah, like our own habits or patterns around like love.
Do you believe in like twin flames? And
No.
does it show up in our chart?
I don't believe in twin flames. I actually I remember when there was a time when I was reading about it,
Mhm.
and this was probably around the time when I was dealing with that particular Scorpio. And I think that that was, so this was like what, 2010, 2011, that this where I was starting to like kind of break into astrology and learn deeper about it. And I remember twin flames being really like that theme being really popular around that time. Um, my only issue, I think, when it comes to talking about twin flames is that I find that sometimes it can be used as sort of I guess an excuse for like why a relationship is like really toxic, or like an emotional roller coaster. And I guess for me, like I do believe that we mirror each other, right? For better or for worse. I do believe that sometimes we have relationship experiences that may be painful or difficult, and they aren't necessarily our fault, right? Because I'm also thinking about, maybe like people who've had like experiences where maybe they were a sexual assault
Mhm.
survivor, right? Or people who have been in abusive relationships, or things of that nature. Um, but I think that sometimes these relationships that we have kind of highlight things in us that we need to heal or grow, like, or grow into. right? Or things that we need to acknowledge, right, within ourselves somewhere. Um, so when it comes to the twin flame theory, I don't know, for me, I guess I get a little bit I don't know, for me it doesn't kind of click for me just because it just seems like I don't know, it seems too neat. I guess that's the word. Like it seems too neat. Like,
Yeah.
okay, you have this person, they cause you all this grief, but you're on this like really like this soul sort of internal like journey with them. I don't know, it's just I don't know. It doesn't curl all the way over over for
Mhm.
me, I guess, if
Mhm.
that makes sense.
It makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like it's the all the qualities of your descendant and the nodes and your nodes like times 20. It's like all the unintegrated parts of um, you that is mirrored in this person. That's kind of how I see that journey. I
Gotcha.
was I was
Gotcha.
I was curious about your own experience since you were into relationships.
Yeah, yeah. I find that like when I think about the relationships that I've had in the past, like I'm in one now and it's hands down by far like one of the best relationships that I've ever had in terms of like long-term romantic connection. He's actually an Aquarius with a Leo moon and a Leo rising. And there goes that Leo. Um and it's he's super sweet. He's an amazing person. But when I think about like who the people that I've dated prior to meeting him, um I do feel that there was a lot of projection going on, like me projecting qualities onto that person that they didn't have, and vice versa.
Mhm.
Um looking for qualities that that person didn't have, hoping, I also have a Venus Neptune conjunction.
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes. Yes. So so a lot of,
I
projection
love
and smoke and
you.
mirrors and, idealism and hoping and, just yeah. And I realized over time that I really had to kind of clear away a lot of that fog, for myself and be very realistic, in terms of the person I was seeing, and how I was showing up, there was just a lot of like murky, hence like it makes sense, that I was attracting Scorpios and, water signs, right? Because, like water can be crystal clear, but it can also be very murky, right? Water is also reflective, right? So yeah, for me it was a lot of needing to make adjustments, in within myself. That doesn't mean that I don't that and when I say that too, like sometimes like with relationships, kind of going back to what I was saying, like when I think about like the idea of having relationships that are painful or difficult, I think about how like, yeah, like not necessarily about like blaming ourselves for it, right? Or even to so much as like finger pointing, but how also like it's important for us to acknowledge like our role within those relationships, but also like, yeah, there may be times where we need to hold others accountable,
Mhm.
too, right? So yeah, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, in relationships, it's so easy to point the finger at the other person, but then like, well, there were two people in a relationship. I think I
Right,
learned that in my own healing journey that it wasn't all the other person, even though I want to blame them for everything. Like I
right.
definitely had to hold myself accountable too in the
Yeah,
relationship.
yeah. And
Yeah.
that's hard. It's
Oh
hard. it
yeah.
it really takes,
Humbling.
yeah,
I'm not
totally.
perfect. Oh my.
Right.
Um, I
Right.
remember when I first met you, so we were sitting next to each other at this delicious Indian restaurant, and I was like grilling you just because like that's how I am when I first meet people.
Mhm.
And and I asked you, did you ask for your person's astrology chart when you first met him, and you said,
Mm.
oh, you waited for a little while. And I thought that was interesting because most astrologers would be like on the like, astrology astro gold or something, like looking it up and be like, are we soulmates? And you didn't, you waited. And my question is like, as an astrologer who you have timing techniques, you have all these predictive techniques like under your belt, how
Hmm.
do you also know certain things but then also trust in like divine timing and like letting things play out when they're meant to?
Right. No, that's a great question. And it's something that I've been exploring, I would say maybe over the last couple of years, right? Because again, we had the pandemic, which, kind of slowed time down, brought life to a halt for many of us. And during that time, it was like I found that I needed to be reflective, and I found that I needed to um be careful about living in the future and focus more on kind of living in the now. So like as an astrologer, and this is something that takes practice, right? Because like as an astrologer, I think we have like a special sort of insight, right? Like we can kind of see things or spot things before others might, necessarily catch on. And I think that like that gift of foresight can be really helpful when it comes to like, mapping out our path or kind of like, figuring stuff out. But I do think that sometimes we can get carried away with constantly looking ahead and looking forward and not really focusing on the present, right? So it makes me think about like there would be times when whatever transit or whatever season was going on, and you'd be like, oh, I can't wait until Mars gets out of Gemini. Oh, I can't wait until, it's, Leo season, or I can't wait until, Mercury is no longer retro. Like, there's always, I find that including, other people would always be like, oh, I can't wait for this, or I can't wait for that. And after a while, it becomes like a never ending sort of thing, right? Like, every time there's a transit, every time, you're going through, there's always this like, oh, but when this, when we, just constantly kind of looking ahead at the next thing or the next big thing and not really kind of focusing on, what's in front of us. And I find that like when we do that, or at the least like when I do that, it kind of robs me of the joy of being in the present, like, and kind of puts a lot of pressure to on like unnecessary pressure, like on the future as well, because like you can have transits that have a lot of promise, right? Like for example, like Jupiter, right? Like we love a Jupiter transit. Jupiter is fun. Jupiter brings, abundance and gifts, but then there's times where Jupiter doesn't really bring that much, right? Depending on like how we're, utilizing or like what the timing is. And sometimes, you can hype up a transit and say like, oh, this is going to be the best thing ever, and then it could come along and be a total dud. You know what I mean? Sometimes the other way, right? Like we can say like, oh, this transit, it looks so bad, this is awful, and it may not actually be that bad, right? So I think for me lately, and this is also kind of like why I haven't been as active on social media talking about transits. I mean, I still have my horoscope column and things like that I write. But I haven't been motivated to hop on and talk about this stuff too much right now, because I think I'm really focused on trying to just live it
Mhm.
and embody it and like kind of like let it sink in. Because sometimes too, I find, especially like with certain transits, like for example, we have Pluto and Aquarius, right? Literally none of us were alive the last time
Mhm.
Pluto was in Aquarius, right? So for all of us, this is a fairly new transit, right? Like that we've never experienced before. We can look back and see like, okay, this was happening, the last time Pluto was in this sign, but actually living it is a different story. And so like for me, yeah, I've been finding that like it's been a little bit more helpful to kind of sit with the energy and to embody it rather than trying to kind of assess, or predict what it's going to be.
Mm.
Because I think lately I personally have had too many experiences where there's been something, especially the more like some of the more precarious transits of like, oh, this looks really bad, this is really awful, and then you're bracing for the impact, and like nothing nothing happens, or not in the way that you think it is,
Right.
so I think that's something that we need to think about or consider, as astrologers, like not only just predicting what's going on, but like how do we like just kind of live it
Mhm.
too. Yeah.
I also think um, you can't avoid the more difficult transits because they have a purpose too. And I find
Mm-hmm.
a lot of these pop culture astro weather reports and all the things that are going on now, they pad these transits in a way that's more digestible, in a way that's more palatable. But some of these transits are going to fuck up your life. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was sharing with you, I just came out of this Pluto square. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've had Pluto in my second house for 15 years. And honestly, it started getting really spicy in the last couple years with Pluto in Capricorn because it was squaring my Pluto and it was touching my South Node.
Mm-hmm.
It was so visceral and it was so like I had to face all of my fears with what Pluto took away. And that
Mm-hmm.
shit was scary. And it was,
Mm-hmm.
but it's unavoidable. It's life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not
Right.
something that I think I was prepared for
Mm-hmm.
because first I wasn't that attuned to Pluto, and all the astrologers that told me about this didn't fully and it's not their fault, right? Because I don't think anybody can really understand what you're going to go through unless you walk through your own shoes.
Right.
But it was fucked up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
if I had more preparation just somatically of what that would do to my body, uh,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I do now, and that's how I help my clients is through somatic trauma work and healing
Mm-hmm.
because it's so not only psychological, but it triggers all of your like ancestral memories, with Pluto.
Right.
And again, I think those are the most impactful transits, not the easy ones where Jupiter's like, you get money, you get money.
Right. Right.
It's like these Saturn and Pluto and sometimes Neptune and Uranus contacts where it blows up your life that I feel really make you who you are. And you shouldn't avoid
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me too, like I've been dealing with so I had, well, Saturn was an Aquarius, and I know you can attest that Saturn, was going over my moon. That was a, pretty heavy. That was a lot. And then, with Neptune, so I'm a late degree Sag. So with Neptune in Pisces right now, Neptune has been squaring my son over what last year and a half, I want to say. And that has brought up a lot of stuff for me in terms of like questioning myself, and kind of like, who am I? What am I doing? Like a lot of that. But I also realized that I needed to do that because I think sometimes in being a Leo rising, I think sometimes like that authenticity piece, is a piece that sometimes I wrestle with. Like how much of me do I want to show, the world? Like how big how much space do I want to take up? And so yeah, so with Neptune being in the picture, like I needed that fog or that fuzziness in order to kind of get in contact with the real me. So yeah, but these transits, I agree, like they're not easy. They're not easy to deal with. They often upend your life, or they upend your world in some way. They challenge you. Um And I think that that's the big thing too. I don't know if you find that this happens for you, but like I find that like people who come to me, whether it's for consultation or, people who want to interview me or people who are asking about like the state of the world right now, I think a lot of people are concerned and frightened, and rightfully so. But I see there's a lot of people who are like, when is this going to be over? When are we going to, when is this done? When, is this, are we, and I, and having to constantly remind people like, no, we're in it. Like, this is it. This is not something that's going to clear up, in a 2 weeks time, in a year's time. Like, this is some, major, deep doo-doo that we're in right now. And we have to, we kind of have to hold the line. We got to hold space for that. So yeah, I think it's important to yeah, to think about like how do we embody these transits, right? As opposed to just kind of like theorizing or trying to predict them per se, but like okay, like what do we do with it? Like how do we live it, So, yeah.
I have Sun square Neptune natally, so I also find it very therapeutic when you speak to other astrologers who, like, I asked you, how is your sun conjunct your moon? Because I also have an Aquarius moon, and we were like commiserating over that and sharing our experiences. And sometimes I feel you get more clarity on what the transit's lessons are after the fact, because
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't even tell you what it was doing until it cleared into Pisces. But
Right.
looking back, I was like, wow, I was super depressed. I had no
Mm-hmm.
energy. I didn't want to eat. I just felt like, wow, depressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that is 100%. Yes. Like I find that sometimes I can't speak to things, or sometimes I don't have words for a transit or what's happening because I haven't lived it or fully experienced it yet. But yeah, I like after going through it, after sitting with it, then I'm like, oh yeah, like this and this, like it's easier to connect the dots. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Which is why I think hopefully people will have some kind of astrological literacy and like understand how to read their own chart and transits, because then they can interpret what certain things will mean for them versus just listening to an app or a weather report and somebody telling you what meaning to make out of a transit.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's why one of the reasons why I wanted to do my astrology journal, because I wanted to give people an opportunity to journal and keep their own record about like how these transits are affecting them so that they can learn their astrology in real time and see like, oh yeah, when Pluto was on my moon, I was like, I was in a bad way, but it was also empowering, like people are able to kind of go, they can kind of keep record of these things and use that as a learning tool, So yeah.
Oh, this is my astrological journal. It's not as cute as you, but I'll be like, Saturn fucked up my world from 2020 to 2022.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, totally.
um, what are your feelings about fate?
Um, I do believe in fate. I do think that there are events or things in our life um that are orchestrated, you know, like outside of our control. Um, but I know that this is like a huge like can of worms. Like people, like there's this can, kind of be like an age old argument, but I do believe that there is fate, and I also believe in free will.
Mhm.
I think that, but I think that the two go hand in hand. They're not divorced of each other. Um, Whereas I think sometimes people are like, no, everything's fated, and then there are people like, no, like I choose my own path. But um I think there's room for both. And I don't know, maybe this is the mutability in me of like it could be both, and it doesn't have to necessarily be and or. But yeah, I think there is something to be said for um a promise, right? Like the fate, like this is the destiny, this is your fate, this is, the promise, like that's essentially like what the birth chart is, right? The birth chart is a promise, like this is what this could be. But then the free will comes in to say like whether or not we actually embody that or embrace it or fulfill it,
Mhm.
right? Like it makes me think about like how people can be born on the same day at the same time, but their life doesn't necessarily have to take, they don't exactly have to take the exact same path, right? Like you can have two people born the same day, and one can go left and the other one can go right, depending on what's happening. So yeah, I don't know, I guess that's rather simplistic way to look at it, but I get that that's how I tend to see um or kind of sum up that argument, fate versus free will. I think they both go kind of hand in hand.
Okay, I love your answer because the more I study astrology, the more I'm like, it's all fated. It's all written in the stars because it's so freaky.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
mean,
even when I choose something off of my path, it's like that's also written in the stars, you know?
yeah. No, totally. I mean, I remember a situation with a cousin of mine who um his mom had passed away, and his older sibling, he was like the baby of the family. So his older siblings who had lived in a different state, they were like, well, we don't want to leave him in New York because, we don't want him to get into trouble, like so one of his brothers decided to take him out west to stay with him to kind of like, kind of give him a fresh start. Incidentally, the story didn't end so happily because the very thing that his siblings was trying to rescue him from, he ended up doing that in the news space, and he ended up passing away, as a result. And I remember this was some years back, but I remember when that happened, that for me was kind of like a really huge thing of like, wow, you could do as much as you can to try to avoid certain things, but there will always be things that still find you no matter what.
Intervene, yeah.
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 Yeah. So, um, yeah, for me, yeah. So yeah. So when people are like, oh, like there's no such thing as fate, there's no such thing as destiny, and things of that nature, like it kind of rubs me wrong because I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that.
Or when you do like synastry charts and you look at like, well, I've clearly done this with my ex-boyfriends and like seeing the synastry, it's freaky. And you're
Hmm.
like in that way, I believe in fate and destiny, which I know they're different, but I sometimes I'm like, how could this be
Right.
if
Right.
the fate wasn't real?
Right.
Random person,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I mean, I also think about like progress charts, and like how our progressions will also speak to the people that we date or meet. And I find that like if I go back and look at some of my progressions from before, I find that some of the guys that I dated, like their charts kind of coincided with the transits that I was having.
Ooh,
Like that was also really interesting.
that's interesting.
Yeah, that to me was pretty freaky of like, here I
Yes.
am having this transit, and then I'm meeting someone who kind of like is a living, walking, breathing version of this transit, and their role in my life helping me to learn more about like how all of this sort of plays out was interesting too. Yeah.
Yes, now that you bring that up, I was going through my progress moon in my eighth between 2020 and 2022,
Mm,
that area, and
mm,
all of the people I was attracting were cancers, like
mm,
all of them, very watery people, and I was like, what's
mm.
going on here?
Yeah.
And now my progress moon is in Leo, and now I'm attracting all these Leos.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's literally like I feel like it's like a little vortex that attracts people in.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Like the energy, yeah, like I just feel like the universe is sort of like prescriptive in that way of kind of like, okay, you're ready for this lesson, all right, now here's the people who are going to help you learn it. Here are people who are going to help you to like absorb the information, or the lessons that you're supposed to be learning at this time. So yeah, yeah, that yeah, to me I feel like is definitely faded for sure.
So I've been single for almost a decade now, so I think the universe blocked other people from me, or I, the universe saved other people, like they saved them from me, because maybe I was like too, Sag rising, Aries sun, Aquarius moon, so I needed to heal parts of myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when I think it's funny because now that I'm in my 40s, um and I think about the fact that with Aquarius ruling my seventh house, my partnership zone, Saturn, when I think about Aquarius, I look at Saturn. So, Saturn ruling my seventh, it to me it makes sense that it did take this long for me to meet someone who I actually feel like who I can actually have a real, genuine, loving partnership with. Because prior to that, to me, it was very much like the school of hard knocks in terms of like love and figuring all that stuff out. So now that I'm older and a little wiser, which is very Saturnian,
Very-
I feel that I'm reaping the reward of that work,
Are
that
you
very hard work that I had to do around relationships. Yeah.
are you the Saturn and Pluto and Libra generation?
No, I am a little bit older. I am Saturn Virgo.
Oh, right, you said that. See,
Yeah.
you look so young, so it's like hard to tell. Your Venus and your Neptune are making an illusion.
I know. Tricks, right? I know the smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, what you just said about again, astrology was so healing for me and validating for me because of understanding personally how everything has a timing. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
single right now, maybe look at your Saturn, maybe look at the ruler of your seventh house, maybe look at certain things in your chart. Maybe you're not meant to have a relationship until you're in your 40s, literally. Because
Mm-hmm.
I meet people, I'm from the Libra and Pluto, Saturn and Pluto in Libra generation, where
Mm-hmm.
so many of us have been single or not married until now. And I'm literally like, don't worry, our time is coming. We just
Mm-hmm.
needed to clear that Pluto first.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, especially too because when I think about like Saturn and Libra, Pluto and Libra, I mean I do have a Pluto and Libra as well. But when I think about Saturn and Pluto and Libra together, I think about yeah, like this was your generation. It wasn't about following the same old traditions that our parents, or our grandparents followed where it pertained to relationships. Because a lot of when you look back at like these ancestral connections or these relationships that our ancestors had, I mean, yes, there was marrying for love, but a lot of it was survival. A lot of it was survival,
It was
right?
all survival for my
Right.
ancestors, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, people staying together because they had to, not because they necessarily wanted to. And so, our generation, the Pluto and Libra generation, we were the ones who witnessed, a lot of people getting, separation
Mhm.
and divorce, right? Rates, skyrocketed, which before that was unheard of. Like, you don't get a divorce, you don't leave, like, you don't do that. It's, and so yeah, to me, I think with Pluto being in Capricorn and kind of brushing up against that, I think it was people choosing to be like, no, I'll wait. Like I don't need to rush into marriage, and I don't need to rush into, becoming a parent. And I don't need to, kind of follow some of these like traditions that we were taught that we were supposed to follow, where it pertains to like family and, marriage and, all of that. So yeah, I think that now that you've cleaned that out and have come up against that, now that you can go into relationships free of some of those restrictions, that uh our ancestors had to
Yeah.
deal with.
And I think with the Aries Libra eclipses coming, it's being more in conscious like couples and conscious partnerships,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that like you can be independent in relationships.
Right. Right. Yeah. You can be independent. Um, you don't have to, be codependent, Um, there's different ways that you can do relationships and still be committed.
Mhm.
Right. So yeah.
Okay, so there are so many more things I want to talk to you about, but in the interest of time, you'll just have to come back.
Yes.
'Cause relationships is something that I'm very interested in now, because I am seeking a more conscious relationship, and I feel like, I feel like I'm better ready. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but let's talk about you. You've written books.
Hmm.
You have a podcast. You've been on TLC. You
Yes.
have been on major publications. Like you're a big deal. You're a major
Oh,
big deal astrologer. Is there
thank you.
anything on your bucket list that you want to like accomplish?
Oh, that's a good question. Anything on my bucket list? I don't know. It's funny because with Uranus, so I've been having those eclipses in Taurus in my 10th house. Uranus is in there now. That
No.
Aries eclipse took place in my ninth, and Jupiter's there now. So like it's funny because I feel like I'm in a space right now where I'm ready to go to like open up another chapter in my story, but I'm not quite sure what that chapter is. So for me right now, I think it's kind of like kind of giving myself some space to kind of explore that and kind of figure that, because like things that I've done, like everything that I've accomplished up until this point has been because I was drawn to it. Like I didn't necessarily have like a plan for it per se. Um, it was more because like, oh, this seems exciting. This seems fun. Oh, I would like to try that. Like it was more of that. So now that which is such a sad
I
thing.
just said, I was gonna say, I'm exactly like that. I have like no business plan. I have no like strategic thing. I'm just like, I like this.
Yeah, like I'll try it. Yeah, very saggy in that regard. And so I think for me right now is especially like I said, still dealing with the Neptune square. Um I'm trying to figure out like what's next. I'm not exactly clear on that just yet. Um so when it comes to the bucket list, I don't know yet. I don't know. Yeah.
Hey, I like that answer actually, because that means you're open.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like
I'm definitely open.
that.
Um I'm also trying to get more comfortable with like not feeling like I have to have
The answer.
something. Yeah. Yeah.
And by
Yeah.
the way, can I just like give you some kudos because you're probably the first astrologer I've seen who's like, put your boundaries up and went private amongst all these scammers bullshits.
Oh yeah.
And and I was just like, damn, Mecca, you go. You
Oh, they
fuck you, Meta.
Yeah, it was Mars, see, Mars and Gemini, that I was getting that Mars and Gemini opposition. And it's funny because before Mars went retrograde, I think this was around the time when he who shall not be named bought Twitter. And I just felt it in the air. Like I was like, all right, shit is about to go really weird. And I was already struggling with Instagram in terms of like the scammers. I had so many people emailing me, reaching out to me. It was just like almost like an everyday thing. Like it got so bad, and it was so annoying. Like I would get so angry about it because people scamming and ripping people off in my name, like especially for me, because I was always someone who was like, integrity and like safety and ethics, like, so to have that happening, it was just such a frustrating thing. So yeah, I decided to go private. And I know that like for people who have a business, and with the way the algorithms are, like they punish you if you don't check in every day, if you're not using all the features and making reels. And it just was like, I don't work for y'all. I work for me. Like I'm not, trying to figure out how to drive up engagement. It just, I don't know, it just became more trouble and than what it was worth.
Mm.
And I unfortunately, right, because of the work that I have been doing, I've been fortunate enough to have built up a reputation for myself where I didn't need to solely rely on social media anymore. And that was also contributed to, me going private. So yeah, like I just it was to alleviate the headache. It was also to protect people because the followers, like them targeting, not only targeting me but also like going through my followers list, to target other people, and it was just like it just got too much. So that was a big reason why I went private on Instagram. And I know that they have like the verification thing now. If you subscribe for a certain amount of money a month, I really don't see myself um getting the verification, because I don't believe that it should be something that you should pay for. That's, personally, like I don't believe in that, especially because I just know. Anyway,
Is that
about that, I'm
Aquarius?
about to go into like a whole rant.
No, I know. I feel like that's an Aquarius. Is that an Aquarius moon thing or Sag thing or Aries thing? Because when that started rolling out, I was like, this is so unethical because like of course people are going to pay for this because they want safety. They want
Right.
these scammers to stop, but you're backing them into a corner and you're not creating a safe space for content that drives up your engagement for your app. And then you're
Right.
asking people to pay for that. I just thought it was so unethical. I was like, I'd rather just not and
Right.
move somewhere else. But
Right.
and I don't shame any creator that does that because they have to do what they have to do.
Right. 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 Right.
But like for me personally, I was like, oh, fuck no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For me, it's definitely a personal decision. Like I know that there's people who have bought the verification, and maybe thinking it over. Yeah, definitely no shade, to them whatsoever. But yeah, just for me in terms of like my personal brand, and my value, my values, I'm just like, I'm good.
Mhm. Which is why I resonate so much with you and your work. Thank you so much for being here. It was such a pleasure to speak to you and laugh and have
Oh
fun.
yes. Thank
And
you. Thank you for having me.
And if anybody wants to work with you, I'll link all of your stuff down below in the show notes.
Yes, yes, please. Yeah, thank you, Laura. It was such a pleasure.
Such a pleasure.